Welcome back to 5.3 on standard deviation. Let's begin. So what deviation means is it is the difference between a data value and the mean for the same set of data. And what a standard deviation is a measure of the dispersion of the data values in relation to the mean. Now that's very complicated. The actual work of it is not too bad. A low standard deviation indicates that most data is close to the mean. Remember, the mean is the average. So if we have a low standard deviation, that means that a lot of our data is centered and very close to the mean. Okay, there's not a lot of dispersion or outliers. A high standard deviation indicates the data is scattered far from the mean. Okay. Now the process for finding the standard deviation is a little bit time consuming. We'll do a couple today. You only have, I think, one, maybe two on your exam to actually have to find the standard deviation. It's not hard, it just takes a few minutes. But we'll only do a couple of them, okay? So I'm gonna click ahead to the next slide. Again, you can come back to these afterwards if you wanna get them down. Here's the steps. Now, don't write this down right now. Just maybe write this last part, and I'll write it up here so it's a little bit easier to see. And then we'll talk about what all the things mean. Okay. So here's the steps to calculating the standard deviation. And we're going to do a couple of these today. Standard deviation is this guy right here. I'll label them. This little circle here is the symbol for the standard deviation. Oops. Okay. Step one is to calculate the mean. Remember, the mean is like the average, okay? So this guy over here, the X with the line on his over top, that's the mean. Step two is to calculate the deviation, which is just saying X minus the mean. So if we had, like, you'll see here in a minute, but if we had, actually, I'll just show you on the next slide. And then step three, we're going to calculate the square of the deviations. Step four, we're going to add them all up. This guy right here, he means the sum. So that's like calculating the sum of the mean of the squares of deviations. Now again, I know that sounds complicated. Once you can see it on a chart, it's not that bad. Then we're going to divide it by n, and then the last step we're going to square root, okay? So, don't freak out just yet. Give yourself a minute here. Let's try one with an actual example where you can see how it works. Okay, so example one, they're going to want us to calculate the standard deviation to compare the following sets of chemistry exams from two classes. So here's what it looks like. Right, make yourself a little table that looks like this. We're going to start with class A. And we've got five marks that students got on tests from class A. 94, 56, 89, 67, and 84. I'll give you a minute to get this down. I don't want to rush you through this part. So step one in this equation is to find the mean. So remember, the mean is the average. So we're going to go 94 plus 56 plus 89 plus 67 plus 84 is 390. 390 divided by 5, there's 5 marks there. The mean is 78, okay? So the mean is 78. To fill in the first column of the chart, we're just going to take the classes and we're going to subtract them, take the mark, and subtract the mean. We could end up with negatives or positives from this, it doesn't matter, okay? So 94 minus 78 is 16. 56 minus 78 is negative 22. 89 minus 78 is 11. 67 minus 78 is negative 11. And 84 minus 78 is 6. Okay. Any issues so far? We're okay with how we got those numbers? Okay. So you can see that was right here, right, where we did the deviation. We went x minus the mean, right? Now you can see we're going to take those numbers and we're going to square them. So we're just going to square every number in this second column here. So 16 squared is 256. Negative 22 squared, remember negative 22 times negative 22 is going to be positive. So that'll be positive 484. 11 squared is 121. Negative 11 squared is positive 121. And 6 squared is 36. Okay? So all we've done is we found the mean, we subtracted the mean from all of the class marks, right? That's how we got our second column. And the third column we just multiplied, or we just squared them. Okay? We good if I switch over? Another second to finish it up. Okay, now the numbers are on the next slide anyways. So once again, we calculated the mean, we subtracted to get the deviation from the mean, we squared those numbers. Step 4 is to calculate the sum. Let's use green. Step 4 is to calculate the sum of the squares. So that's, remember right here, the sum. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this column up right here. So let's add those numbers up. 256 plus 484 plus 121 plus 121 plus 36 equals 1,081. Okay? Step 5. Oops. Step 5 is to divide by n. We're going to divide the number in step 4 by n. N is the number of tests marks. In this case, n was 5, right? Why am I in yellow? N equals 5. So we're going to go 1,081 divided by 5. We will get 216.2. And then in step 6, we are going to calculate the square root of step 5. So that 216.2, we're just going to take the square root of that number. And our standard deviation is 14.7. So therefore the standard deviation for this is 14.7. So that complicated formula that looks really bad at first, right? Which we've got right here. It's not actually that bad. While you write it down, I'll just talk through the steps again. We found the mean, then we subtracted, we went x minus the mean for all of the test marks. Then we squared them, which gave us these numbers right here. Then we added those up, divided by n, and took the square root, and we were done, okay? And that's how we find the standard deviation, okay? Now, the question wanted us to do it for Class A and Class B, so we're going to do this again, just as one more extra practice, and that's the only time we'll do it today, okay? It's just those two examples. So here's class B. So if you want to actually take a moment and try to do it yourselves, that's probably good practice, okay? I'll write down the steps like here again. So step 1 was to find the mean. Then step 2 is right here. Step 3 right here. Over here is step 4. Step 5. And that's really messy. And then down there is step 6. Okay. Take a moment and start to fill it out. And then we will look at it together here. All right, I'm going to start working it out. 84 plus 77 plus 76 plus 81 plus 74 is 392 divided by 5. The mean here is 78.4. Okay. Now I got to go 84 minus 78.4 is 5.6. 77 minus 78.4 is negative 1.4. 76 minus 78.4 is negative 2.4. '81 minus 78.4 is 2.6. 74 minus 78.4 is negative 4.4. Now we have to square all of those numbers. This is 31.36. 1.4 squared is 1.96. 2.4 squared is 5.76. 2.6 squared is 6.76. 4.4 squared is 19.36. Okay, in step 4 we're going to add all of those numbers together. Is 65.2. In step 5, we divide that number by n, which is 5. 13.04. And then in step 6, we take the square root of that number. 3.61. Okay. Did we get 3.61 as our standard deviation? Hopefully. Okay. Now, what does that mean? For example, what does that tell us about the tests of these two classes? Okay, remember one had a standard deviation of about 14 and the other one was around 3.6. Okay, so what that means is the standard deviation, once again, is a measure of dispersion of data about the mean. So how close the data is to the mean, to the average. Okay, when data is concentrated close to the mean, it means the standard deviation is low. When data is spread far from the mean, the standard deviation is high. Okay? So if the standard deviation is low, that means everyone's tests were right around the average. Okay? There wasn't too many that were like way higher or way lower. Everyone was sort of close to the mean. That takes us to the end of 5.3. Standard deviation, again, you're only going to have to calculate it once or twice on your own. In the rest of the unit, you use standard deviation to help you figure some other stuff out, but you don't have to calculate it a ton. So I'm going to give you the assignment. It's on the workbook. Workbook page 118 to 121. But I'm going to put a note here. Don't do every question, okay? You don't need to do every question, okay? It's too much. Sometimes they give you questions with like 12, the n being 12. So then your column becomes quite long, right? Because you've got to find the mean, and you've got to subtract it from all of them and square it. It becomes a really long question. So I don't need you to do all of them. Just try one or two so you understand how to do it, so you can replicate it on a test. That's good enough, okay? So that's the end of 5.3. Come back next time for 5.4. Thank you. Have a good day.